everybody, I am Sarah. Welcome back to Overkill Reviews, Banger's weekly heavy metal review show. Happy New Year! This is my first review of 2020. Let's go! Things have been super busy on my end. My epic doom band Smolder announced the release of our new EP. It's called Dream Quest Ends. It's out March 13th. And in March, we'll be touring in Greece. And in April, we'll be playing at Hell's Heroes. So if you're gonna attend, please come say hey. Before I really dive in, I have to remind you, please head on over to our Patreon, throw some money our way if you haven't already, and of course, make sure you click subscribe. This week, we are reviewing a highly anticipated debut album by a Copenhagen-based death doom band who has only one demo to their name and yet has already played a ton of festivals. Let's get into it.
Wicked girls!
That's right, it is the crushing debut album by KONVENT. It is called Puritan Masochism, and it's out today via Napalm Records. All right, let's get to know KONVENT. KONVENT formed in 2015 in Copenhagen, Denmark. Now made up of bassist Heidi, guitarist Sarah, vocalist Rikke, and drummer Julie, the band quickly gained interest after their 2017 4-track demo. That demo is a ripper, and for me, the highlight is the closing track. It's called No End, and in it, the quartet just locks into this indomitable groove. KONVENT has also been playing some killer heavy metal festivals, including Roskilde, Copenhagen, Temple of Doom Days, Metal Magic Festival, and more. The band was eventually signed to Napalm Records, who are throwing a lot of weight behind this release, and the marketing materials claim, and I quote, that it wouldn't come as a surprise if Puritan Masochism conjures up a deserved revival for the whole death doom genre. Is the press material overselling this, or is it on the nose? Let's find out. So, death doom can be an interesting genre because, well, a lot of bands in it seem to fail at locking into that damn groove that transforms death doom from an okay genre into a absolutely fantastic fucking crushing one. To talk about a genre highlight, for me at least, is easy. That band would be Asphyx. I think about a release like Last One on Earth or The Rack, and specifically tracks like The Rack or MS Bismarck, because in those songs, they have a lot of dynamics, and those songs end up feeling like they have a lot of weight and intention. For a modern example of death doom with a lot of dynamics, I think that Temple of Void and their album Lords of Death, which we reviewed here on Banger, and specifically the track Graven Desires, is a great example of a track with tons of dynamics. The reason why that band, I think, broke out is because they know how to make a dynamic death doom song, which a lot of bands kind of fail at. But if we're going to talk about death doom in a larger sense, there is another delineation that we should refer to. This isn't a positive versus a negative. It's the fact that death doom often has a very linear style of songwriting. So when I think of linear songwriting, I think of a release like Spectral Voices, Eroded Corridors of Unbeing, or Swallowed's Lunaterial. Both of them are extremely heavy and suffocating and oppressive, but they're not really focused on sonic diversity. In contrast to that, bands like Temple of Void and like KONVENT are going for more dynamics and for more diversity. So you're getting like a crushing sonic landscape, but you're also getting pretty parts within the ugly parts. It also helps that KONVENT is keeping their songs rather short in the context of death doom, and the longest song on this album is, about 7.5 minutes. And because of that, there's few times on this record where you kind of feel stuck in that loop or stuck in that groove or stuck in that riff. And that can be a positive or negative depending on your preference for atmosphere building via repetition, which is a very common tactic within death doom. So the first 5 tracks of this album are great, but the second half is where things really start to shine. So for example, track 5, it's called Bridge. It's a highlight. It starts out with this kind of old-timey film sample, and then it goes into this repeating riff, which gets heavier and faster before then reverting back to the original pace and then collapsing under its own weight. Idle Hands is another track which is very hypnotic and repetitive, and it's got this simple little riff which is kind of repeated endlessly, but everything else is just building and changing and like coming into this climax, and it just really works because everything's just interwoven really nicely. But it's when they get to the very end of the album where things truly become, well, the best of the entire album. There's Ropes Part 1, which has this extremely morose intro, and it reminds me of when Asphyx really leans into the doom side of the band. That track, again, slow, trudging, glacial. And here I really have to give a shout out to vocalist Rikke. And I asked one of my friends who speaks Danish to make sure I was saying her name right. Her vocal melodies work really well with Sarah's guitar lines. And altogether, what I'm left with is a sense that Rikke is a really good amalgamation of Runhild from the Mighty Thor's Hammer and the vocalist of Finland's own Rippikulu. She sounds like the fucking perfect, like Cookie Monster, very dry, guttural growler. And for that, I have to give her props. So she, the vocalist, Rikke, and the entire band stand out the absolute most on Ropes Part 2. That track is the best on the album. About 3.5 minutes in, you get this awesome call and response growling sections, and you're hearing like a slightly more guttural and slightly less guttural like vocal melody section that I think is just the pinnacle of the album. And then the final 2 minutes, it just kind of sounds like a record that is skipping, and it leaves you with this kind of sense of dread, which is just a perfect ending for a Death Doom record. So now to talk about the worst parts. I have listened to this record 19 times, and so far, I don't really have a lot of complaints. I think the main thing that I've noticed is that I don't really remember a lot of the riffs, with the exception of that one I mentioned in Idle Hands, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. I just don't think that this is a guitar-dominated album. It's more everybody working in conjunction, and that's kind of an artistic choice, not really a comment on the quality. Final thoughts. I can see why Napalm is throwing so much of their weight behind Konvent. They have their low end locked in, and this album definitely has the potential to be widely embraced, which is something that most albums don't get to enjoy. I think this one could do it. That said, I don't particularly like the oversell in the marketing, and the line, in particular, we'll go back to it, that says, "It wouldn't come as a surprise if Puritan Masochism conjures up a deserved revival for the whole Death Doom genre." I think that's an oversell. This band stands on its own merits. The album stands on its own merits, and they're not reinventing any wheels, but this is a stellar example of Death Doom. Simply put, Konvent is getting attention because they write good songs. You don't need to oversell it to me. I listen to it, I can hear it's good, I know it's good. These ladies are clearly very deeply immersed in an excellent, albeit rather obscure, subgenre of heavy metal, and they write great songs. So, for all those reasons, this album is getting 4 skulls out of 5 here on Overkill Reviews. All right, it is now time for the shoutouts. And then you can hear my voice echoing. Shoutouts. First up, there is a new studio album by Blasphemous Black Thrashers, Midnight. Their 4th studio album, called Rebirth by Blasphemy, is out today via Metal Blade Records. If you are into shotgunning beers and sexy nuns with forked tongues, you're gonna love it. Portuguese trad metal warriors Iron Sword will be releasing their new album Servants of Steel today via Alma Mater Records. If you like Manila Road and Manowar, this will be right up your alley. Finally, don't forget, classic French speed metalers ADX are releasing their next studio album. It is called Bestial, and it's coming out via Altum Records. All right, that's it. Bye!